Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone joining us in this Zoom room and on Facebook Live. I'm Marc Spiegler, Global Director of Art Basel. Welcome to our new online conversation series, which will focus on how the COVID-19 pandemic and its knock-on effects are affecting the art world now and what it could mean for our future. This is an experiment for us, so you may need to bear with us as we learn in public. For this first episode of the conversation series, we'll start with those to whom we are closest, gallerists. I'm joined today by the founders and co-founders of galleries ranging across 4 continents and a wide section of the art market. Between them, they have 7 spaces. Only 2 of those are open right now. Because of their geographic locations and the way that the virus spread, our panelists face very different personal and professional situations at the moment. A quick word about the format. We'll start with a question for each of the panelists. Then we'll have a few questions for the whole panel. And at the end, we'll take questions from the audience using the question and answer functionality at the bottom of your screen. So please hold your questions and we'll get to them at the end. I'll start with Lorraine Kiang Malingue. Working with her husband, Lorraine opened Galerie Edouard Malingue in Hong Kong in 2010. They represent artists such as Wong Ping, Samson Young, and Ellen Pao. Lorraine, while we were trying to set up this panel, I had a couple of messages from you saying you couldn't talk because you had a birthday or at a dinner, and tomorrow you have an opening for Gunther Forg. I have to say that being in Europe, it's both surreal and inspiring to imagine an active social life in the art world at the moment. But because Hong Kong was caught up in the COVID-19 crisis much earlier than we were in the West, you're further along in this than the rest of us. When did it first start to impact your gallery, and how has the arc of that impact gone?
Well, I think, thank you, Marc. Thank you, Art Basel, for inviting us to be on this panel. I'm happy to be in Hong Kong now. As you all know, I think we've had days where we have 0 infected cases in Hong Kong. So we're very happy that we're opening the show of Gunther Forg in Hong Kong tomorrow. So we have 2 spaces, one in Hong Kong, opened in 2010, and in Shanghai 3.5 years ago. Unfortunately, we had to close the space temporarily end of April due to the virus and multiple reasons that we thought it was unsustainable to keep running the program there. We hope to reopen soon again in China, so we're just waiting for the right moment to do so. And as for Hong Kong, a lot since last year, I would say. And with the virus, we really got hit starting the end of January. So in Hong Kong, the gallery has been closed multiple times on and off. We've had weeks in February up till April that we've been closed. So it has affected us dramatically. We've tried to think of new ways of engaging with the public. And I believe that we're at a much better place now, but it's a moment for us to rethink the model of how we engage with the public. And for us, I think the people closest to us in Hong Kong and around Asia is most important right now.
Yeah, Lorraine, I mean, I think it's not quite an art world question, but I think, you know, one of the things that Hong Kong benefited from in this situation was the experience of SARS before. If you were living there, could you compare what the experiences were of these 2 medical crises?
I remember during SARS, the market dropped dramatically, and there were people jumping off bridges. So that was a really scary moment in Hong Kong. The real estate market prices tanked. It's a very different situation today in Hong Kong because the market has still been very strong. People are holding cash with them. It really doesn't feel like people are in as much fear as back then. But because of this health situation, people are extremely cautious about how they move, how they communicate with one another. But that doesn't stop people from trying to be together or trying to communicate with one another. It's really just about how to do that in a safe way. I think people are very aware of being protective of one another. So I think the idea of people wearing masks every day. People are very cautious. People are sending masks to one another. When there was a shortage, people really try to help each other. So I think that community bonding is very strong. And so I think we're tighter as a community. And I think that's really great.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to go next to Lisa. Lisa Spellman founded 303 Gallery in 1984. She represents artists such as Mary Heilman, Doug Aitken, Karen Kalimnik. Lisa, you opened more than 35 years ago, so you've seen the art world and society in general go through a lot of ups and downs. People use terms like unprecedented and unparalleled when they're talking about the current situation we have with this pandemic. How do you see it in comparison to the past challenges that you faced as a gallerist?
That's a good question. So, of course, New York is right in the middle of the infection right now, and it's a little bit hard to compare. Each crisis has had such a specific catastrophic element to it in New York, and usually what I find is we come back to a very different city. Like after 9/11, it was a very different city. Sandy, a very different city. Like right now in New York, the stores are boarded up, the restaurants are boarded up. It definitely has like a extremely apocalyptic feeling to it. People are really trying to take care of each other. I find that in the gallery community and the artists, everybody's checking in on everybody. Everybody's trying to see how they can help, how they can share resources. I think we're all a little exhausted trying to come up with creative online content for people. I remember the first week that I was home, we closed the gallery March 12th, which was a little less than a week after the Armory. We spent a lot of time developing our online, viewing rooms. And I'm really glad that we did it, but like now everybody has them, of course, and it's a really great way to engage people, and I find that they respond well. And I think in general, the artists have been super supportive. A lot of them want to know what it's like to be creative during such a catastrophe. And it's like different for every parts of the United States. LA feels different than New York. Most people live in small apartments, so they're going crazy. The collectors have a really different perspective. They find it's a really soulful time to be with their family, and they're connecting to the landscape or nature. So it's really like who you talk to on a daily basis, what kind of response you get. I mean, for me as a gallerist, my primary function is to fight for the gallery, fight for the artists, fight for sales, fight for like survival. And and I mean that in a loving way. I don't mean that in an aggressive way. And I really am so curious. We have an amazing opportunity to rebuild the art world and come back to something completely different, because we all know we built this crazy merry-go-round that we were like kind of stuck on perhaps. And if maybe the last crisis for New York was 2012 for Sandy, or 2008 for the economic meltdown, the art world was like 80% slower or smaller. So the stakes are so much higher now. The responsibilities are so much greater. So it's a very, very different response. It's a much more problematic response, really. And we're not used to canceling things. We're used to like scheduling things and events and programming and talks and shows. So we've gone through the whole first month of canceling everything, and now we're trying to slowly build up towards next year. But honestly, we don't know when New York is going to reopen. We haven't really gotten clear guidelines, except for that the arts are phase 4. So that means it's the last thing to open in New York. So we're hoping that the ADAA and maybe Bloomberg can kind of clarify that for the galleries. Like perhaps, just one person at a time can come in to see a show, which I think would be an amazing experience for viewers. So I think when we come back, I think the audience will be very like happy, because it'll be a much more intimate, personal experience. I mean, I'm probably going to sit at the front desk because I'm so like hungry to see people.
Yeah.
And then just like quickly, like before, you know, we all had each other physically. So this is just also weird, you know, being alone and isolated and trying to like stay connected to people. I'm not like a super Zoom person. Maybe I'm a better phone person. But yeah, you know, the dark thoughts can really creep in very quickly unless you like keep in touch with your colleagues and offer advice. I have no advice, but I mean, I would love advice actually.
Yeah, I think most of us have more questions than answers, and that's just the reality of the moment. I mean, obviously you went through several huge financial meltdowns. Of course, there was the, you know, New York after the World Trade Center attacks. Is this really unprecedented, unparalleled in terms of the total effect upon society that you're seeing in New York?
I mean, I feel like if I compare it to 9/11, it belittles 9/11 somehow, because that was just such a like an. I just still don't even have words to describe 9/11. I mean, I remember then we had the whole anthrax attack after 9/11, and so. Right. I remember Sam Keller was actually in our space after a week of being shut down. Actually, it's the opposite. Giuliani had sent people to every gallery begging them to open after 9/11, right, because nobody would take the subways because of the anthrax attack. And my mailman came into our space wearing a hazmat suit and like a full-on respirator and giving me my mail in a clear garbage bag. And Sam was just like, okay, I guess we shouldn't really do Miami, because, you know, it was still crazy. And yeah, so this is so different. This is like a slow, silent catastrophe, but you get to see glimmers of it through no one on the streets. And, you know, all the pictures that you see in the media, the horror of seeing ambulances in front of the Javits, where the armory was, you know, is a gigantic military hospital ship surrounded by military. So I ride my bike by there and kind of thank them, you know, for being there. And it's really different than 9/11, but the financial toll, I think, will be worse for galleries because it's a longer haul. You know, we're anticipating a fall. I mean, I think the other spike will come in September because no one's wearing masks when they go to the parks or the beaches. So, yeah, I think we're looking at a year. So that's a lot of overhead. Thank
you for that historical perspective. I'm going to go now to Jose, who has galleries, of course. And, you know, he and his wife, Monica Manzutto, founded kurimanzutto in 1999 as a nomadic space. Today, they represent artists such as Gabriel Orozco, Damian Ortega, and the Lauren Calzadilla. Last year, they opened a second space in New York City, just about a year ago, if I remember correctly. Jose, you're in Mexico City, although you and your family have been living in New York for this year. You told me yesterday that you were one of the first businesses to close down in Mexico because of the coronavirus. And I guess you closed both galleries at the same time, but Mexico was even slower than the United States in terms of its health measures. What was the reaction in Mexico when you closed the gallery?
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and honored to be with my peers here. Well, we opened the New York office over almost 2 years ago. So we moved in to be there also for a family situation. So it was very interesting to suddenly have a spring break, come back to Mexico, and suddenly we've been here ever since. And which, I mean, is great in one sense to be home, to be in our usual home. So that, I must say, that has been quite nice. Well, we decided to close the gallery in Mexico very early on, also because we were kind of, even if the US was a little bit lagged behind, it was not as much as Mexico. I mean, I don't know, because of the weather, at some point, they say that in warmer weathers, there was less risk of spreading the virus. I mean, you know, information has been changing by the day, so you don't know what to believe or where to stand to make decisions. which on the other, I mean, this has been also quite interesting to make all these decisions by the day. That, as Lisa said, we're used to plan way ahead, and now we're just taking decisions like, I mean, like farmers. Like today, it's about it might rain or not. So that's been quite interesting. So we decided to close early, and I don't know. I think I don't know exactly the reaction because we saw a little lockdown. But I don't know. This make us think how important are our decisions as individuals. At the end of this, if we all take care of each other, I mean, this would be a way easier situation. I mean, we won't need this lockdown if we are quite aware of ourselves and taking care of the others. I think this could be a whole different situation. So that was sort of our path of thought. Let's stay calm, stay safe, protect each other at this time. And suddenly, I don't know, this was very early in March, and suddenly everything started to close. So it felt good that we made the decision early on. No, we did it at the same time in Mexico and New York.
Were people surprised that you closed when other people had not closed?
Well, I don't know. I mean, at least for all the people that work in the gallery, that is probably our closest families, the people that we see every day, they felt kind of reassured. They felt good that we were making this decision, that we're taking care of each other. We were able to stay connected very early. The Zoom suddenly came into our lives. Appear into our lives. We cannot escape from it at the moment. And I don't know, I think people felt good that we were making this decision. I don't think people were surprised in general in a bad way. I think, I mean, we were early, but it felt good.
Do you have any sense now for when you might reopen in Mexico?
Not really. As information is flowing, we are about to start the peak today. Mm-hmm. Actually, today and tomorrow will be the peak.
Wow.
So we don't know, but we don't know. We're just, as I said, we're playing by the day, which I don't know. I mean, also has certain good things about it. No, I mean, meeting with the staff every day and just thinking together, talking to the artists. We're very much connected to them. They're all over the world. So it's I don't know, we're getting the feeling from so many different parts of the world. So we're just doing by the day. I don't know when this, I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's one of the interesting things when you talk about this sort of, doing things day by day or not being as planned, sort of as not planning as we could in the past. I mean, one of the big challenges I think for all of us is that in the past, if you were running an organization, be it a gallery or a museum or an art fair, you would sort of think, what are the 2 or 3 most likely scenarios? And then you would try to plan deeply into those. And now you have many, many more likely scenarios, but you can't plan deeply into all of them because you know that 2 weeks from now, half of those scenarios will become irrelevant. You just don't know which half. And so it's a complete adjustment in the way that we think and that we plan. I'm going to go to Emanuel now. Emanuel, Layr founded his gallery in 2011 in Vienna. Represents artists including Cecil B. Evans, Stan Filko, and Tillman Kaiser, whose show is up now, is open now. Emanuel, you reopened your gallery roughly 2.5 weeks ago, making yours one of the first galleries in Europe to do so after this long lockdown period. Tell us about the reactions you received when you started sending out announcements that you were reopening the gallery, and also what has it been like to be open now?
Right, thank you for having me at this panel. We have been opening on April 22 already, and after shops, smaller shops in Austria were allowed to reopen, and I carefully discussed that with my team, how and if that could be possible. And very soon, through these regulations for commerce, we understood that we can fulfill these regulations in not having more than 2-3 people at the gallery, which what Lisa said before is actually a very nice thing, to have not more people at the gallery at the same time. And in doing so, and that was also part of the discussion, because the week before we thought we will never be able to sell a single artwork or open any ever again. So we thought we need this positive signal for our environment to try it at least and see what's coming, also knowing that potentially we need to close again out of different reasons. And the reactions have been overwhelming. I was really surprised and didn't expect that many friends and people called me from Italy, Germany, from all over the world where the lockdown was still in place, being curious of what that means for us and how we can do that, and what it means for the artists and the upcoming exhibitions. I realized it sent a strong signal, which then was also so encouraging for me myself to go on with the business, actually, because this doesn't, of course, relate to selling works or interacting with collectors, no, not at all. But it gives this feeling of being operational, and I think that's was for us a very good starting point.
Great. You also have a gallery in Rome, which is a completely different situation than in Vienna. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So in Vienna, we were able to open the show a day before the lockdown, which was strange because only half of the people came. Everyone was already quite occupied with the situation in Rome. We wanted to open an exhibition in April, which of course we had to postpone. And I was really worried when I got the news of North Italy, of certain regions in Italy, what's going on. And I tried to have as much as communication going on with many friends. But of course, it was impossible for me to think of going to Rome. There was transportation or accommodation was very difficult. And still Rome is is closed, and you can't open a gallery there before May 18. So we will see how that will develop, and hopefully we can look into it and see how it's possible to start in June again, or even in summer, which is interesting this year because we won't have this generous closed situation in August, because we need to work, we need to use the everyday possible to recover a bit. And this goes, of course, together with the situation in Rome. I'm in touch with many people, and we have to just see and wait how that will be possible to really open after May 18.
Great. Thank you, Emanuel. We're starting to get questions from the audience, but I mean, I'd like to ask you a few questions before we go to those. I mean, even before this crisis, the days when gallerists like Leo Castelli would sit in their gallery, most of the artists were living in New York City, the majority of the business was done in the space, those days are long over. And people are already talking about the market being much less personal, much less face-to-face. A lot of business was already being done by telephone, by email, by text message. I mean, that being said, of course, it must be very different. I'm curious how your interactions with collectors are different than they were before. Question to anybody.
Yeah, I miss collectors. I mean, if we could go back to the 90s, that would make me the happiest. Culturally, musically, art world-wise, it was such an intimate experience. And New York, you know, we've lost so many of our artists, and we ask the city of New York all the time if there's anything that they can do to create studio spaces for artists, or how are galleries, you know, we're going to lose all of our galleries, we're going to lose our artists. So I really miss the days of dealing one-on-one with the collectors. And I know they feel like it's also our fault. You know, we sit on the second floor or our offices are in the back. So.
But now it doesn't matter because anyway, even if you were sitting at the front door, they wouldn't be coming. And I guess I'm curious, you know, I mean, I'll tell you what I've heard. Some people say they have a very hard time getting people to focus on buying art. And yet other collectors who they're talking to have more time than ever and are actually very interested in learning about new artists or very interested in considering acquiring new works. And I mean, obviously, I think a crisis tends to broaden the spectrum of behavior. I'm curious, what are some of the more encouraging conversations you've had with collectors or interactions that you've had with collectors during this period?
Well, for us, I mean, we had, we started doing a preview of our show that opens tomorrow in Hong Kong. And I do have to say that since last week, we've been inviting friends and collectors into the gallery, and people have been spending much longer time than I have ever experienced in Hong Kong with us in the gallery physically, one-on-one. And I'm thankful in a way of this whole situation, because people are really thankful that there's some show happening right now of high quality that they can spend time with. They're spending much longer time than if the market was open, if they had work to do. And in Hong Kong, usually you can do, 15 things at the same time in a day. And instead, they're spending the whole afternoon at the gallery chatting with us. Even though if it may not be the right type of work for them, they are happy to converse and to talk about the situation in the world and to talk about art. But I think that time that they are able to give us it's quite precious. And I think it's thanks to this situation that people are more aware that this time is very important.
I mean, just briefly, it's such an extreme situation that it's difficult to think it's just a temporary thing, and it will be hard to foresee how it will be in the future. So it's just a very temporary thing, you cannot tell a way of behavior at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we think about what's going on in this situation, I always talk about 3 different types of impacts. One are things that are going to change because of this crisis. I mean, I think one example would be people wearing more masks, more people wearing masks when they fly, not just people from Asia where it was much more common. I would say other things are like the acceleration. I think one acceleration would be obviously people learning to do more business or trying to do more business digitally. And then the other one is just a temporary effect. And I'm always personally taken aback when people are trying to contextualize this crisis as a good thing. I think the fact is that we all woke up one day and effectively our future had abruptly broken up with us, where so much of what we had planned becomes impossible. So much of what we had hoped for seems to be at best a kind of dream deferred. But that being said, looking back at the last few months, do you see changes going on now that we can carry forward into the future of the art world in a positive sense? Have you observed things, or have you developed things yourself, or have you seen things changing that are for the good in the broadest sense in the long term?
I mean, we're in the middle of Frieze Live Art Fair right now, and one interesting feedback that I'm getting from consultants, art advisors, is that they have a lot of new younger clients that feel that this is a good time for them to come into the market, that they'll be offered works that they never would have been offered before. With the expectation of staggeringly high discounts, which is not going to happen. But I found that incredibly optimistic, that even though it may feel opportunistic, younger collectors are feeling like this is a great time to start collecting contemporary art. And they are relying more on digital. So we're spending a lot more time filming works on a 3D. I mean, I'm not using drone or virtual reality helmets yet. But, you know, just like a simple film of a piece, you know, 360 is enough for them with historical information to feel like they can commit. So I see that as a very good sign, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I might say something here at this point. I think that because of course, less exhibitions and fairs happening now, I think also that the production went down a bit of art and our like kind of need for works and which also relates, of course, to the situation of artists, as they are sometimes having difficulties now to produce works or do works and cannot show them. So we are in this situation of dealing with less works, and which could be also in favor of us and also collectors, so that you can be able to focus on great works and go deeper into those works and share them accordingly. So I think for me, a knowledge and discussion about individual works and bodies of works which are out there and which are sometimes also present on online viewing rooms. I still have this problem of putting works which were planned for a show just online somewhere. So this is for me still not clear how comfortable I'm with this situation. So we are discussing the qualities of these works also in relation to our online presence. So I think this will help us for sure to consider works and context of presentations.
Yeah. It's interesting you should bring up the artists, because we haven't really talked about them much in this context. I mean, one of the things that I think makes artists so interesting is that they tend to see the world in a very different way than other people, often with a highly individual, less linear, more poetic kind of perspective. I'm curious to hear some of the more interesting responses that you've had from your artists, you know, either personally or professionally in this time of crisis.
Some are very happy just to be at home. You know, they're tired from traveling and they feel like it's a nice sort of excuse to stay home with the family and just be very quiet in the studio and not be bothered day and night. So I respect that enormously.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone deals differently to this response and to this. And for example, many artists that we work with, they were very happy not to have any response at all, just letting time go. They needed to be more calm, more rest, and not even wanting to, the need to respond or to say what's their creativity going in this moment. I mean, they just probably wanted to be with their family, with their kids, with their significant other. And that also teach me something, that, I mean, you don't need these very quick responses to everything. No, we're so used to, you receive an email and you need to respond within hours of it, a phone call. I mean, this sort of slows down and probably goes down to the essentials of things, no? How you deal with your relationships, with the things you like, with reading a book, with just let time pass by, no?
Do any of you have artists who are making work specifically related to what's going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Stephen Shore has a series on Instagram, hashtag art in COVID times. So he's just documenting what he's seeing like around him. And then Doug Aiken was filming like really apocalyptic beach scenes early in the morning or late at night that were just completely like empty, like Mars. So yeah, I've seen like interesting works made from this.
Mm-hmm. Good. I think it's fair to say that for most people, there are very few great days right now. Although sometimes we see signs of hopes, I think there are like hard days and harder days, and yet we're all fighting on, we're on persevering. I'm curious, what keeps you going through the most difficult days? Where does the energy come from?
Private question.
Okay. Fair.
No.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm somewhat responsible since I've been working with 20 some artists from the gallery over the years. So I really feel like I can't stop at this moment. And I'm very committed to the artists, to the collectors, to the community in Hong Kong and in Shanghai that, I mean, we must survive this. And I think if we can, it's, when we look back at this moment, it will be such a great time to reflect, you know, how we dealt with this, and things will never be the same. So I really think that we must do this one step at a time.
Yeah. Good. We have some questions from the audience. We won't be able to get to all of them, but I mean, maybe jumping off of your last point, Lorraine, one question is, as gallerists, are you rethinking the way that you work with the intensity of the job, the feeling that you have to be everywhere all the time at every one of your artist openings, at every, you know, at every fair, at every museum opening? You know, is there a sense, you know, I think somebody called it a merry-go-round before. Is there a sense that people are going to get back on? Are you going to get back on? Are you going to get back on in the same way?
Is that for Lorraine?
I think that's
for everybody. It's for all of you.
Well, I think, I mean, everything's changing so much that, I don't know, I mean, reality will be such in a shifting way that it will be hard to think you will come back in the same way. I mean, coming back to that, going back to your previous question of what gives you energy, I mean, just loving what we do, loving what I do. I mean, even if there is no market, even if there is, everything changes. I mean, working with artists, having a gallery, that's essential for me. I would love to do it, even if everything shrinks to the smallest, tiniest. We don't need the market to be working with artists, which is why we opened the gallery. So I mean, these very essential things, that's the things I have energy, like an artist that cannot be anything but an artist, cannot do anything but do art. That's the people I would love, I like to be related. The galleries that can only do that because it's in his veins, it's what keeps him alive. That's what gives me energy.
Mm-hmm. I remember many years ago, I attended the commencement ceremony for the Art Institute of Chicago, and the president at the time, I think was James Wood, said, if you have a choice about being an artist, don't. You know, and I think what you're saying is if you have a choice about being a gallerist, don't, because these are the moments where it's going to take every single inch of perseverance and resilience that you have to keep moving forward. And I think also, you know, Lorraine, you brought up this thing, which is there is a degree to which, you know, you're almost in a, I mean, I don't want to use the word parental, but you're in a role of caretaking for your artists, of trying to push them, to help them push forward. And, you know, and often I think being a gallerist can be as demanding as being a parent. It's just that you have a lot more kids to take care of at the same time. One question from Jane Hamlin from Frith Street, so one of your colleagues in London, says, what are the 3 most important things you would like to change when rebuilding the new art world? So when there's whatever the new normal is for the art world, what should be different?
I mean, if I may start quickly with that one.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in preparation of our next show, which should open around the 19th here in Vienna. And we discussed with the artist of course, not doing openings, that's clear, but how to get in people, make interesting formats, and start with new ideas related to that. So I think for me, this whole party buzz, which is nice, I love party, no doubt, but if you can cool that down a bit and try to be smaller groups, more content, more essential conversations, I think that would be, for me, ideal, and this could stay a bit longer like that, I would say. I see the essentiality of it, but I think less hysterical things around that, what it's about, I would prefer to have.
Other things you would change, other panelists, what are your thoughts?
Well, if I may continue, I love Jane. That's a great question by Jane. What I will do is more collaborations, more collaborations with my peers. I would love to be more engaged in collaborative work. That I would definitely love.
Yeah, it's actually it's actually the topic of our next panel, which I'll get to at the end of this panel. But certainly, I think there have been a lot of examples of people collaborating with each other in this period. Lisa, Lorraine, what would you add or subtract to the future new normal for the art world?
I think it's really important to somehow manage to slow down. I don't know to what extent this slowdown should be, but I think this slowdown should happen in many different levels, from how fast the shows should be, to how much travel we should be doing, which is why I do agree with Jose that collaboration is key to helping to do projects that doesn't require us to be, one day in Berlin, the other day in New York, and then this is getting crazy, and just to help save the planet as well. I think the system has really pushed us very far, and maybe this way somehow to slow down, we would appreciate what each other are doing much more. So yeah.
Good. Lisa, do you want to throw in a thought there as well?
Yeah, amazing question by Jane. I think besides surviving, those are the questions that are pressing on my mind every day. And I think if New York could just become almost a consolidated commune of galleries, because what we've all built is untenable. And I don't know, it all went horribly wrong a few years ago, and we need to do a lot of soul searching to see what we need to do to get back to basics. And there are amazing things that we've all built together, but I guess I just agree with my colleagues, slowing it down. Also, people have to have this this perception that galleries are these constant giving trees. It's not sustainable. We can't support every artist studio, every production, every museum show, 10 art fairs a year. It's not, when you're showing contemporary art, you're not charging huge amounts of money to support the enterprise that everybody thinks that you can support. So I think if expectations were more modest, that would probably relieve a lot of pressure. And we have to support our younger galleries. The older galleries, the bigger galleries have got to stop seeing the rest of us as breeding grounds, for them to choose from, we have to respect each other's sovereignty, and what they've built is a beautiful thing, and nourish that, don't corrupt it and take from it. But that's human nature. That will never change. So, but that's my wish.
Good. One of the things that, and here I'm melding together different questions from the audience. One of the things that I think a lot of people have been pushed into is to do more digital initiatives. Lisa, you talked about this sudden, endless appetite or need to create digital content. I'm curious how it's been for you to suddenly, go digital. The same way as it is for us at Art Basel, having one fair canceled and one fair postponed, you're like, well, okay, but we're not going to go completely quiet. There's still things we can do. How does it feel to sort of shift so much of your activities into bits and bytes from atom and molecules almost overnight? And what have you had success with, and what do you still find more challenging? Question to everybody.
Well, you're doing this because there's a need to do it. So when things come from out of a need, I mean, it's just a natural way to act. I mean, obviously I miss the physicality. That's why I do art, because I love I mean, that's one of the great definitions. That's what I like art. But I mean, when things come from a need, I don't know, you don't even question too much yourself. You have to do it because that's the way things are going now. So you try to make it the best way you can. So I don't question myself that much. I mean, that's the way to go now. Temporarily, it will stay more probably, but I mean, that's the way it is. I mean, before you didn't question yourself that much. You had to travel. Well, travel is part of what you do, and you do it the best you can, you know.
I think it's also a question of resources, because smaller and medium galleries might not have the money to create amazing online viewing rooms and go digital on the same extent others do. Also, I agree with José that it is not clear what the future will bring. So if the little money, which is not there actually, I would invest in big digital programming, and everything goes back to normal, I lost also money and time for different things. So I think, yes, it's important to go on with digital initiatives a lot. I'm so amazed how great projects pop up all over the world now. It's a creative moment, big time, but I myself try to be a bit careful with it. Of course, update online presence here, make maybe the website better there, or do better photographs, but I'm not going overboard or crazy with that ideas to just like focus also on the artists and the work. The actual work.
Lisa or Lorraine, thoughts on suddenly being digital, or more or less 24/7, 365 digital?
Well, I think for us, being in Asia, part of the market is within China. And within China, people have always been communicating digitally, and that has been the main source of communication. So I think that adaptability has already been happening in China. But then again, whether or not we should delve ourselves fully into a virtual space, I really disagree with that, because I mean, just by people reacting to how excited they are being in the physical space to see a show, maybe they would get fewer chances in future to physically see shows, but I think that they fully appreciate that. So I think the virtual space would probably complement these physical shows, but I don't see why and how these physical shows can be avoided. I mean, this is the basis of what we do. So for the artists as well, I think they would understand that there's a limitation now to how often shows should happen, and how often their works can be shown. That would be affecting also the number of production in the future, but perhaps there would only be higher quality works that will be shown because of that limitation. So I just feel that this would give probably new sets of prerequisites for works to be presented in this new era.
Lisa, it looked like you were starting to say something. Do you want to add?
I don't think I could add.
Okay.
Other than just like, I mean, for me, one like nice moment was I got to go to Mary Heilman's house, and of course I was staying like 200 feet away. And but I wanted to film. We were asking in the beginning for artists to give us little films, and like I was just really focused on the landscape and nature as being just a place of rejuvenation and creativity. And so some of the artists like Alicia Cavade had just planted some flowers in the backyard of her studio, so she did like a little film of that. some artists are like, I don't really want to film anything. So I went to Mary's house and then I just kind of filmed her like walking through her field or her garden. And, you know, it just felt like very, it's digital because it'll be part of our OVR room, you know, but it was just such a like nice, simple, organic process that I never would have been able to have done like 2 years ago because I wouldn't have had the time, you know, or the thought. So I think just from doing our own analytics, it seems like our website's getting visited more than ever before and our OVR rooms are getting really high hits, but like, I just really care about sales now. So
right.
I like to create content and keep everybody engaged, but ultimately it has to like, you know, June, July, and August are going to be brutal in New York City. So we're just very like sales focused.
I mean, I will say that I think there's this kind of meme that this crisis, this pandemic is going to push the digitalization of the art world, and there won't be a need for galleries, there won't be a need for fairs, that everything will happen online. I just don't buy it. I mean, I think it's possible in other industries, but I think, you know, what the galleries sell are unique objects to unique people. And I think to the extent that the digital does work now, it's because all of you and your colleagues traveled relentlessly to show your works, to introduce yourself, to introduce your programs to people. So the longer you don't travel, the longer you don't have shows, the less successful digital becomes, not the more successful, would be my argument. And you can say it's self-serving or subjective, but I actually think it's accurate. A question from Alain Servet, who had many, of course. We're all living extremely local lives, be that within an apartment, within a block, you know, within a city. And it's fair to say that I think it's in many places, the businesses will open up before the borders open up. Like there are galleries in Zurich that are open, but nobody can come into the country at the moment unless they have a very good reason to. So at least for a short part of the future and perhaps for a midterm future, the galleries will have a purely local audience. And I'm curious if you see that not only as a downside, but also as an opportunity. Is this a chance to reconnect with the people of your city, with the art scenes of your city? And how do you do that?
Well, I mean, art only makes sense if it's local. My job as a gallery only makes sense if I'm very local. So, I mean, I mean, being local is the most important, the essential, one of your essentials. Art makes sense only if it's very local in a very particular situation. Things that start to talk to the wider public, to the wider world, I don't know if those make sense. I mean, the best art is the one that answers just a very, very local question, or that makes the very local questions.
Other thoughts?
Yes, I think also the regional is very important and has always been, and now we experience exactly that problem, that if you were not focused on that, and then you have a big problem now, that you need your close environment a lot out of different reasons. But what I also thought is interesting, I just saw another question from Tasmania, actually, which was interesting, asking how museums and galleries can collaborate, which I think in this context is also an interesting question. I think they can, they can do that stronger, and I don't see a problem if it's about sending shows around the world. I think it's possible, or also now to ready to ship works, and I think in some cases this can be done together, and so shows can be brought to also Tasmania on that way from everyone, and wherever they need to be without yourself traveling too much. So I think regional, yes, but I think we need good solutions to be international in terms of exhibitions and showing your artists abroad, which is for us an important thing too.
Yeah. I have another question from a London gallerist. Vanessa Carlos asks, whether you see the corporate world at large, and by extension, the mega galleries, having the appetite to slow down and run their business models in a slower paced way instead of the model they've been operating by. Do you think that's realistic? Do you think that by definition they'll set the pace? Do you think in general everyone in the art world will try to slow down and do things at a calmer pace, or do you think there'll be even more of a gap between the different approaches?
Yeah, I think the bigger galleries are going to double down and take advantage of whatever weaknesses they see in the system, honestly. And our focus should really be to like nurture and take care of mid-level galleries and small galleries. And I agree, keep it local. Like all of our cities are really hurting, and we've got to take care of our neighborhoods first and our neighbors, and then like gladly like start traveling. And we've always like chased markets all over the world, and it makes sense to make new connections in different cities, but our cities are really, really, really hurting, and we need to take care of them first. And hopefully the viewers will like come, you know, they're all traumatized themselves, but now that the weather is getting warmer, you can see that people are getting really, really antsy, and they like want to get out. So I think the bigger galleries should set a better example, honestly.
Other thoughts from other panelists? Okay.
I agree. I don't see how the gap can be any smaller. Yes, in Hong Kong, I mean, we are surrounded by some mega galleries as well, and then you have some local galleries in Hong Kong running at a very different pace. So in next month, there's the Hong Kong Art Gallery Association is organizing something for the local galleries as well. So I think that community building between small to medium-sized galleries is essential.
Right. We're running short on time, and I promised everybody that we would keep it to an hour or so. Also, I don't want the audience to start disappearing too quickly. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye? There are a ton of questions, which is always a good sign, and I want to apologize to people whose questions we couldn't answer. But a lot of them are topics that we'll get to in future panels. Any thoughts before we go? Thoughts for younger gallerists, thoughts for peers, thoughts for politicians? What does the world need to hear?
I'll just go back very quickly to Vanessa, and I think there will always be space for great galleries. I mean, she has one of the great galleries, I think, and so the distinction between big gallery, small gallery, we shouldn't think about those distinctions, and much more about great galleries. And that doesn't have to do anything to do with size. So I think there will always be space for great galleries like hers.
Lisa, Lorraine, Emanuel, a final thought before we say goodbye?
Well, I just can like confirm what José says, and I think that this particular situation is like accelerating things, good ones, bad ones, and I think so too that great things will maybe then even be greater, and some things maybe are not be here anymore. But I think we should really go on and fight and keep this thing going.
We're staying hopeful, and I hope to see you all in Hong Kong next March.
Yes.
That might be the next fair. I would say our cities really, I mean, I'm worried for our museums in New York, and I just really hope that our politicians, you know, are able to, once we get on the down flattened curve, that they can really like accelerate their support of our institutions, because the collectors can only support the museums so much. So we really need our governments to like support our museums. You know, that's the foundation for our cities. So
Great. Thank you, Lisa. That's actually another panel that we're planning to do with museums as well, and sort of how to reopen and when and under what conditions, and also the importance of reopening, we would argue, as quickly as possible. I want to thank our 4 panelists for joining this session, and I want to thank all of you in the audience who joined from all over the world. If you want to watch it again, or if you have friends who you think should watch it, it will be archived on our Basel's YouTube channel. Our next panel will explore new forms of collaboration between galleries in different cities and features Sadie Coles, David Werner, and Jeffrey Deitch. We will announce the date and time shortly across all of our channels. So thank you very much to everybody, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Ciao, gracias.
Ciao.
Thank you.